As chairman of Google since 2001 and now executive chairman of its parent company, Alphabet, Eric Schmidt facilitates and delivers innovation on a global scale, the key to his brand's ubiquity in our lightning-fast digital age.
Work very, very, very hard to figure out what the world's going to look like in 5 years.
Science is about to see huge gains. Personalized medicine. Think about transportation, the way we go from point A to point B. What about a revolution in education, lifelong education tailored to you? There's an opportunity for a real partnership now between people, computing, machines, their governments, and people in this room. There's an old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eric Schmidt.
Thank you very much. You know, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And I've been studying this question. Look at the extraordinary achievements that the three speakers before me talked about. What's missing? What's missing is our imagination. 50 years ago, we had a vision of this and that and so forth, and somehow we've lost it. And it's time to call on ideas around moonshots that, because of the movement of technology, enable huge discoveries. I'll give you some examples. In Google, we have something called Google X, part of Alphabet now, which incubates things which are 10 times better. Some of them work, some of them don't. But the ones that work huge. Elon Musk was quoted just recently as saying, "I want to die on Mars, just not on impact." Now that's a goal. Right? The president announced a brain initiative because of the advancement in understanding of neural and the way neurons work and so forth, and imaging techniques in the brain. The vice president announced a cancer initiative. Sean Parker, because of gains in immunology and understanding of immunotherapies, raised $250 million for huge new advancements in white blood cell, red blood cell techniques of one kind or another, which will profoundly affect cancer as we see it in our lifetimes. What has changed is that people have both the money and the ideas are now coming together. What I want to do, as just a matter of wrapping up the session, is to give you 4 or 5, which I think are the next really interesting moonshots. The first one I call is nerds over cattle. So it turns out that as much as we like cows contribute to up to 15% of global warming because of the various things cows do. And the fact of the matter is that if we could somehow use plants as part of the food and nutrition cycle rather than meat, right, with the same benefits that meat had but based on plant-based approaches, we could materially both affect the climate change issues, but also because of the technologies dramatically lower the cost of food globally, and everybody needs to eat. We all understand this very well. So from the standpoint of the impact on the environment and farming and use of water and so forth, there's an extraordinary set of things to do. So think of it as synthetic food production from vast databases of organic compounds, molecules, and proteins, which we can now assemble that we could not do before for the reasons that you've seen from the earlier speakers. I'll give you another example, 3D printing of buildings. Now, construction is 5% of America's industry. Everybody knows that it takes 18 months or longer to build a house. Everybody knows that the costs of these things are enormous. Everybody understands that the combination of land costs, taxes, and so forth are making housing very, very, very expensive to Americans, especially people who are struggling, right? There's a technology which will fix this, and it's called 3D printing. We can now actually, using 3D printing, get a house for you, one that you actually like, essentially manufactured in an industrial way, much, much quicker, and believe it or not, they're better built. So you say, oh, I already have a house, I don't need that. Well, what about commercial buildings, right? Think about each of the floors, right? We now know how to actually build these things in industrial factories and assemble those buildings much more quickly, at much less cost, and really service your needs. Why does this matter? Because it's another example of the use of technology, the digital world, and modern efficiency in building things. Do you care? You do. It's a huge tax on all of us. Right? Think about what it takes to build the building that we're in. Think about if we were cheaper and newer and so forth, the benefits to all. And think about it also, when you build these buildings, we can build them with 100% recyclable materials. So it's another good reason from an environmental perspective. I'll give you another moonshot. Virtual reality. It's about to explode. Now, the first uses of virtual reality that you'll see will be in gaming and in sports and in the high-end, sophisticated stuff that's done in Los Angeles, which is phenomenal. But the real benefit is the ability to have augmented reality. That is, to have not only knowing what you're seeing, but also have the computer assist you in understanding where you are, what you should think about, what matters in this scene. So the combination of narrative and new technology and incredibly inexpensive ways of delivering 3D reality, plus the ability to use computer augmentation, will change a great deal. So I think that one is going to happen, and it's going to happen very, very soon. When we talk about the medical revolution, which we've been talking about through the entire conference, it's just at the beginning. Jennifer already talked about the extraordinary achievement that she and her team did at Berkeley around CRISPR and Cas9, but there's a lot of other things to talk about. With mobile phones, everybody here has a mobile phone. It's the most valuable thing that you have. You sleep next to it. 97% of you sleep next to it on and powered on at night. You use your phones more than 1,500 times. They touch it more than 1,500 times per week. It's very personal. It's the perfect health monitoring system. Your mental health, your physical health, and there are a whole industry now of various forms of medical diagnostic and transdermal imaging and so forth and so on that are connected to your phone. Literally, something happens to you, it tells the phone calls the doctor calls you and says, get to the hospital now. Because you're not going to listen to your phone, but you'll listen to the doctor. And eventually you'll learn that the phone is better. If you're in an emergency, just do what the phone says. Right? Seems kind of obvious. Does that matter? Yeah. Think about older people who are having trouble of one kind or another. Because of computer imaging and the gains that we've seen in computer vision, it's now true that computer vision is better than human vision. Okay? Pretty big deal. Pretty big achievement. One of the easier problems in what we do. What does that mean to you? Well, if you have a radiologist that's trying to read the imager without a computer, they're going to make more errors than a radiologist that uses a computer to help them. Going back earlier to what the Watson organization is promoting. They're right. In fact, you want anything that involves vision and a doctor to be, you want the computer to do the vision and the doctor to do the interpretation. How does that matter? There's a technology, I'll give you an example. There's a terrible disease called diabetic retinopathy. It's a disease where if you have diabetes, your retina goes, you get blind. And you can detect it because of blood changes, cellular changes in the back part of your retina. If you take an ophthalmologist, they do it roughly 90% of the time. We do it 99% of the time. Now, are we better? By the way, none of us know anything about ophthalmology, I can assure you. It's easy. We just see more eyes. We saw 1 million eyes or 10 million eyes. So all of a sudden, it makes sense. We now have a project to take a look at healthcare records to try to predict your, I'm sorry to say, rate of deterioration when you enter the hospital. Now, why do you care? You care a lot. Who is the customer of this? By the way, it's not you. You're busy deteriorating, right? It's the doctor. Because the doctor then gets an immediate signal of whether they need to deal with you right now or whether they have time to think, right? Does that matter to you? It's your life. Genetics, CRISPR, and the gene editing that we've already talked about and so forth, perhaps cures for cancers and diseases that have bedeviled us for years over the next 10 or 15 years. These are solutions that will come in our lifetime. Don't get me started on self-driving cars. Let's give you another example of a moonshot. There are its estimate is 32,800 people are going to die this year on the road in America. We just don't know who they are. Isn't that a terrible thing to say? And these are majority young people at the height of their productivity of their lives. And every one of those is a family or funeral. Why do we not have a global and, in fact, a national moonshot around making self-driving cars ubiquitous as fast as possible? The technology works because, frankly, the computer can see better than you can, even if you're not drunk in a car. Right? The technology works really well. So I look forward to this technology, and I look forward to it as much for the life-saving capability of it, especially for the young people who die so tragically in our country. And by the way, the number globally is about 1.3 million people. It's easy to do. Fixing the education problem. Everybody learns differently. We've known this for years. So why do we have a static model around education? Well, it's pretty simple. Right? We didn't come up with a better model. Well, there is a better model. And what you do with computers is you watch how students learn, and when a new student shows up based on the way they present themselves, we can now predict the best learning model and adjust it along the way. And there are now quite a few startups in our industry of essentially computer scientists and people who have this kind of targeting background who are measuring the best educational achievement. And by the way, the education is delivered through teachers, not online. So these are teacher augmentation tools that are showing incredible promise. So we finally, and of course we all understand the issues around workforce and training and so forth and so on, we finally now have a mechanism where we can do this globally at scale, but on a personal basis. And it's the same set of ideas. But perhaps the most profound example is what will be possible with artificial intelligence. And I'll use a simple example. We talked about this a little bit. I'll use a simple example of self-driving cars. So here you are in California, and you found a company in the self-driving car, and you teach it by having humans teach the car how to drive, right? So they watch how humans drive. So it learns a number of things, including driving 60 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone, and it learns the rolling stop. So here you are, and you're in the car, right? And you do the rolling stop. Remember, it's a self-driving car, and the policeman comes over. And he goes, you know, Eric, I'm going to give you a ticket. I said, I'm not driving. I didn't drive. And he looks at the car and he says, did you do it? And the car, which of course can speak, says, well, I don't know why I learned to do it. What does he do? Both are telling the truth. So this underlying technology has issues that we need to resolve. But the fact of the matter is, it's happening. There are plenty of examples of how AI is going to change us, but the best ones are illustrated by science. All of the combinations, all of that intuition that scientists, let's pick chemists, when they put things together, they put this molecule and these proteins together and so forth, they combine this, they're trying to get something. What if we could make that happen faster? How much would you pay to have a 10% or 20% or 30% improvement in material strength in the buildings that you build, or in the cars that you build, or you as a passenger in the cars? These are very close to happening. So here I've given you an example of a set of things ultimately tied by our collective goal, right, to make humans smarter. And our core goal, our absolute core goal, is to get people to be smarter with computers helping them. Thank you very much.